Sold hot dogs off of my friend's front yard. First agency as a junior art director on Covergirl. I was in advertising for about 3 years before I started the company. I get antsy. I decided to start looking for something new, and that's when I ended up at Wethos, which is actually where I met my co-founders. I was freelancing on the side for some nonprofits here in New York.
Yeah.
And they were just constantly asking me for more resources. I'm a problem solver, and I think when I hook onto a great problem, it's just kind of game over. Work, I can't connect directly with stuff that I care about, realizing that there was no place for me to find work that means something to me. Kristen had done a full competitive audit of the space. Claire had put together an entire business plan. Doing good and making money should not be mutually exclusive. We had 6 months of rent in our bank accounts. Claire got a job as a bartender. Squarespace site first, just to get a wait list of at least freelancers. We knew if we had the jobs, I think with any marketplace, there's usually one side that's harder. We knew if we brought the work to the table, the freelancers would come. Organic Facebook groups to do that. So we posted in like New York City ad jobs. We went to every nonprofit event in the city that we could find. We were hitting a huge pain point. Timing matters because we ended up launching the first platform a month before the 2016 election. And that's when we took that momentum to go fundraise. $500,000 in revenue last year, all on word of mouth. Crazy rabbit hole that is fundraising, which is like a whole thing in and of itself. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't go to business school. I didn't even know the difference between like an angel investor and a VC. Figured out that like, okay, we need to raise some money to do this. So we had to run some numbers on, what we needed, who we needed to hire. That was, no one knows how much your company needs to raise but you. About 8 months for me to find a lead investor, and that was, by the end of the round, so we raised 1.1 million in the first round, and by the end of it, I had talked to and gotten over 200 no's. It turns out they needed way more than just one freelancer. So we pivoted, launched this shiny new platform, and frankly, the sales sucked. It was pennies, really, what we were taking home. There's always a reason why something's not selling. Just got to work, and thankfully our investors were brutally honest with us, which is what you need. We really sat down with our customers, and we started asking questions and selling different versions, and then we started creating all of these little tiny agencies. It seems very obvious now looking back on it. So we started pairing them together almost like a tiny agency. Revenue spiked 400% after we launched that in the first month. Money gives you two things. You can either have time or resources. What we needed was time. We slashed everything, our burn to like a third of what it was, and got to work. Numbers don't lie. Well, they can lie, but when the numbers tell you to glaringly do something, you glaringly do it. So we shut off our offering of individual hires, and these are teams that don't exist today. So we're not aggregating agencies onto a platform. We're taking individual freelancers far cheaper than a traditional agency is. The Amazon infrastructure for services form an agency, which is usually too big of a leap for people. Today, besides us, there is no service that can really enable somebody to run that leanly. Music and fashion and sports and other things that people care about. It's not even comparable to an agency because the team itself is so curated and kicked off in 72 hours. Challenging not to burn out. It's been challenging not to emotionally. The mental and emotional strain, I think, is challenging, and I think it's challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs and probably isn't talked about enough. So CEO, you tend to have to be a mile wide and an inch deep, and I love learning as I go. A safety net for our freelancers, things like insurance. Sure, it's been thought of a million times, we're just the first to execute on it. Winner, I guess, of this space is the one who can capture the best talent, and the best talent is going to go to the place that has meaningful work for them.
Hi guys, I just want to take a moment to apologize for the very bad audio in this episode. It's 100% my fault. The microphone for our very esteemed guest, Rachel of Wethos, malfunctioned. It's 100% on me. So I totally get if you want to shut off the episode, but I have about 6 more episodes filmed and they all have great audio, and I am ensuring and taking the steps that never happens again. So thank you so much, and I hope that you get some value out of this amazing interview. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to Startup Hunter. I am here with Rachel Renock of Wethos, and Startup Hunter is also streaming on YouTube, and we take a look at startups that have made it, that are making it, or that have failed. But right now, Rachel and Wethos are still alive, and they are still making it. So Wethos started out as a two-sided marketplace connecting people with specific skills like graphic design or administrative experience with non-profits.
Yeah.
And before we get too deep into your day-to-day and what your company is, I want to go all the way back.
Sure.
So I want to know, when you were little, what the forces were that sort of helped you become the person you are today. And I think the perfect place to start is, what did your parents do?
Yeah, okay. So, my mom was actually an entrepreneur, and she started several of her own companies, one of which she ran through the majority of my childhood. And my dad was a vice president of the Transportation Authority in Syracuse. So I'm from Syracuse, New York. And he dealt with like all the operations of the buses and everything that were, the routes and the drivers and all the stuff that was going on in there. So two very different ends of the spectrum, which I think probably led to my mixture of both like risk-taking and also just general strategic soundness, I guess. But I grew up watching my mom.
No, what did she do?
So she did a couple different things. Mainly the main company that she ran and sold, though, was back in the 90s, and she would go to doctors' offices and digitize all of their paperwork. So they sold computer systems.
Yeah.
To medical offices, back when that wasn't really like a thing at all.
Sure. Back in the 90s, like as technology progresses, different things are like valuable, and things that don't seem valuable today might have been extremely difficult and to do back then, and you could build a business around something like that.
Yeah. So she would go to the doctor's offices that were still running on like paperwork and like handwritten stuff and printing stuff out, and she would digitize. They would set up a computer system for them, digitize everything, and get them up and running. And she did that for a long time. I think at least 10 years.
So you were saying you had an interesting mix of risk-taking. So what was the first entrepreneurial thing that you can remember doing?
The first truly entrepreneurial thing that I guess I would consider part of this story is when I was in college, I sold hot dogs off of my friend's front yard to drunk people on Halloween.
Yeah.
And we went to Costco and we bought like, I don't know, a bag of like 200 hot dogs for like $5 or something ridiculous, and buns, and we sold them back for, $2 a dog, but they were all drunk, so sometimes maybe it was a little bit more than that. And I set up shop on Halloween weekend, and we sold I think I made like $500 that night.
Wow.
Which in college is like a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
And I used that to buy a plane ticket to visit my friend in LA. And that is probably my earliest sort of like pure entrepreneurial status, I guess.
So did you go right from college right into forming Wethos, or what did you do? What did you do before this?
Sure. So I actually went to Syracuse University, and I went there for art school. I went to the School for Visual and Performing Arts. So I've always been very creative. I did a lot of fine arts in high school. And when I got there, I ended up going into design, communications design, which put me straight on a path to advertising. So I became an art director when I graduated, came down here in New York. I got a job at my first agency as a junior art director on Covergirl.
Cool.
Worked for an amazing creative director who I'm still in touch with today, and made a huge impact on me and my career, probably more than she knows.
Yeah.
And and I was in advertising for about 3 years before I started the company.
So a really strong female role model.
Yes, definitely.
And in a probably a very male-dominated advertising world.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I don't know that I necessarily registered it that way, but she was just a really incredible boss.
Yeah.
Frank, was really on top of things, gave me tons of opportunities. Being a woman, it was easier for her to maybe judge me based on potential and not on proof, which is the trap that you fall into as a woman. So she kind of gave me that leash, the long leash to go and figure out what I could do.
So junior art director, did you get promoted?
I left that agency after a year, and I ran a lot of Covergirl's digital content.
Now, were you doing this as your own company?
No, I was employed by Gray's digital agency, which now I think is owned by somebody else. But
Okay.
no, I was full-time at the agency, but at the time in 2013, it was still in the stages, digital was still in the stages of like give it to the juniors.
Yeah.
Which it still kind of is, but I think brands and clients are starting to realize like that it's one of the most important aspects of their marketing strategy.
80-year-olds, like my 80-year-old father knows how to use the phone to the point where I have to tell him like, back off on the Facebook, Dad.
Yeah. So, but in 2013,
Right.
kind of just handed that to like the junior, just like, oh, make some Facebook content, make some Instagram. So like I was shooting Covergirl's Instagram content at one point, like on the roof of the Ogilvy building, like just me.
Just you.
And like nail polish and makeup, like just doing these little mini sets.
So you were doing the styling, you were doing everything on a shoestring budget for a massive brand.
Yes. And I was doing a lot of the digital design in terms of just like social content on Facebook and other things like that. We did a couple of live, like war room type of things for like the Super Bowl and other things like that. But yeah, so that was fun. But I get antsy. So I decided to start looking for something new, and that's when I ended up at Wethos, which is actually where I met my co-founders. And I was there for about 2.5 years before we left.
Was it just the co-founders that gave you the confidence? Like, was it, I met this great team of people, and it doesn't matter what we do as long as we do something together, or was there a conscious like focus on nonprofits? Like,
Yeah.
tell me, unpack that and tell me about the history.
So there was a conscious moment. I mean, in 2016, like April 2016, sort of height of the political chaos, I was freelancing on the side for some nonprofits here in New York.
Yeah.
And they were just constantly asking me for more resources. Did I know any developers or writers? I sort of sat down with them and realized, what a crazy resourcing disparity there was and how they couldn't really find great people. And on the other side of things, I had this huge network of advertising people who really wanted to do more work that mattered to them, and they wanted to apply their skills to something that they felt was making an impact. And at the end of the day, confidence is definitely part of it, but at heart, I'm a problem solver, and I think when I hook onto a great problem, it's just kind of game over. So I went ahead and started researching and figuring out on Upwork, I can't connect directly with stuff that I care about. On any of the job platforms, LinkedIn, anything, there's really no space for people to say I'm really interested in sports or fashion or in our regard, impact, things like that. You can really only search by nonprofit or role. So it's not really it's really stripped a lot of the humanity, I think, out of looking for work. And in a world where work and life continue to blend, I think we really have to take a serious look at how we find and look for jobs right now and think about what's meaningful to us as people and put that back into the process of hiring, because people are looking for stuff that they actually can connect with.
You're looking on Upwork and you're looking on all LinkedIn and all these sites. You're doing nonprofit work on the side on top of your normal job.
Yeah.
And it's really clear to you, or it's becoming clear to you, that these extra things the nonprofits are asking for you are not easy to find. So tell me, this is sort of, when did the light bulb go off, I need to do something about this, and maybe quit my job, and
Sure.
When did the light bulb go off, and how did your co-founders fit in with all of this?
Yeah, of course. So once I figured out, the light bulb really went off when I started looking on other platforms and realizing that there was no place for me to find work that means something to me. And I know how powerful that is just inside of people. And so I started to design the platform myself. I started to just bring it to life, put it down on paper, which is usually just how I do things to get them out of my head. And once I'd had the first couple of pages sort of wireframed out, that's when I G-chatted, I think Claire first, maybe? I don't know, but pretty much at the same time. And it wasn't like I proactively was if I ever start a company, these are the 2 women I'm going to do it with. I met them. What I did know, and what Claire, Kristen, and I continue to have in common, is both Claire and Kristen are 2 of the smartest people that I've ever met. And at the time, I could tell that they had like exponential potential, and the people around them weren't giving them the opportunities to show what they could really do, which is how I felt too. And so knowing that, those are the 2 people that I thought of first, and like, who's going to be crazy enough and ambitious enough to want to do something like this. So brought them in, I bought Kristen lunch, I think I bought Claire a coffee, and I told them, pitched them my idea, said I want to make a platform for freelancers specifically, to be able to find more meaningful work within the nonprofit space particularly. And they loved it. I mean, they also are very impact focused just generally. So that was a huge thing, and they were just fully aligned. And Claire and Kristen, if there's one story that describes them both the best, it's that after I pitched them this idea, I ended up going on vacation, I think, for like a week or so, and I came back, and Kristen had done a full competitive audit of the space. Claire had put together an entire business plan, like a 15-page business plan, like without me having really said anything. And that's when I was like, okay, like when you give people like that the right opportunity, they show up, and that's really what matters the most.
Well, I remember once I had a business idea and I like coded it up, and I went on Craigslist and I tried to find somebody to help me code it, and he's like, and I was trying to tell him like, yeah, this is gonna be super amazing and nobody's ever done this, and he's like, cool, I'm not interested in equity, but here's my rate. So the fact that you found this kind of enthusiasm, I think is really amazing.
I'm really happy. I'm really lucky that I found them. So anyway, I brought them on, we put all the materials together, we started doing market research. When we found out what a huge market opportunity this was in terms of the resourcing in the nonprofit space, which is quite frankly like completely untouched except for the sort of old school traditional staffing firms. And the nonprofit space is huge. I mean, they're like the 3rd largest employer in the US. The resourcing opportunity in the space itself was ended up being like a $150 billion market.
So it's a market in theory. And what was the first step? So your co-founders Alexis and Kristen.
Claire and Kristen.
Your co-founders Claire and Kristen. They do the audit, they do the business plan,
Yep.
And what was the next step in manifesting and realizing this?
Sure. So the market research was a huge thing, and just in terms of like the opportunity and what we wanted to do with it, because we needed to know, like, can we make money here? Can we sustain a business here? And fundamentally, we believe as a company and as people that doing good and making money should not be mutually exclusive. And that has to shift dramatically in our culture in order for us to fix a lot of the problems the core problem space, frankly, has created. So for us, like, we wanted to find a way for this to be sustainable and also meaningful, as I'm sure everybody says when they're doing any kind of social impact thing. But predominantly, I think, we realized after talking to so many nonprofits that these people are solving some of like the toughest problems that exist in the world today.
Right.
And the fact that they have to rely on, their cousin's graphic design volunteer down the street to get a website up for them so that they can solve hunger is insane to me. So we really wanted to find a more sustainable way for them to find the resources that they needed that was still affordable, and freelance is a great way to do that. So that summer, we kind of got over all these sort of hurdles on, can we make money here? What's our business model? What's the situation? Started really pouring into the design of the platform itself. We made the classic mistake, I guess, maybe not a mistake, but classic assumption that most people do, which is, let's just build it and then we'll get people on it, which would not be the approach I would take today, but that's what we did. We found a developer, I met him actually in a coffee shop, convinced him to build it.
For free, or?
Yeah, the first iteration was free, and then we paid him after that. And then we all sort of made a plan. We had 6 months of rent in our bank accounts, so we worked until we had enough for 6 months. And then we quit our jobs in August 2016, And I also want to be clear, we didn't quit our jobs so that we didn't have to work anymore. Claire got a job as a bartender, Kristen got a job in a coffee shop, and I freelanced. So we still had to pay our bills. We really quit for more flexible work so that we could be available during business hours. And we just grinded it out for about a year. We ended up launching our first MVP about a month before the election.
So you were saying how building it first maybe not a good idea. So you're building the MVP. What are you doing to market it, on the side and,
Sure.
and build some hype?
Yeah, so the classic sort of like marketplace chicken and egg situation. I mean, the good news is that for us was that we had an amazing background experience in marketing and sales. For the first couple of people, we actually ended up building or deploying a Squarespace site first over the summer, just to get a wait list of at least freelancers. We knew if we had the jobs, I think with any marketplace, there's usually one side that's harder. We knew if we brought the work to the table, the freelancers would come. Easier side is to get a sort of a short list of freelancers who are interested in doing this. And we used organic Facebook groups to do that. So we posted in New York City ad jobs, hey, we're going to build a platform that connects people with more freelance nonprofit work. If you're interested in hearing when we're live, give us your email. Ended up getting 300 emails in 2 days. Organic Facebook groups are amazing and they still work really well today. It's the last part of Facebook that actually works from a marketing perspective. After that, we were okay, people really want this. And what we started doing is just straight up networking. I mean, there's really no silver bullet to it. We went to every nonprofit event in the city that we could find. We went to freelancer events, we went to tech meetups, and we just started getting the word out there, literally on foot. And the network just started growing, and that's also how I ended up raising investment money.
So, okay, even before we get into investment money,
Yeah.
Was it sort of do you feel you needed one customer, and by customer I mean nonprofit, one champion? Or was it sort of there was just a lot of interest pretty much all at the same time?
Well, there was a lot of interest, predominantly because we were hitting a huge pain point. And most people, when they approach the nonprofit space, I think, in wanting to build a business around it or tech or whatever, it's always so focused on fundraising, which I get. Everybody wants the dollars, everybody wants to fundraise. There's a million fundraising platforms out there now. And no one was focusing on the fact that they don't have the resources to do the work that is required to do a digital, fundraising campaign. That requires an entire team. So with our focus on resources, I would say pretty easy to get our first couple of people because their other option was just word of mouth, asking around.
Okay, so you have, can you say some of the first companies that were on?
Yeah, I mean, we did a ton of work with Project Orphans. They're out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We did work with the Vacuteer. We did work with a lot of the local nonprofits here in New York, some of the LGBT organizations that I was working with. We had these really incredible freelancers, and we showcased their portfolios and their capabilities. And at the end of the day, putting that match together and getting some work done that I think was more the challenging part rather than sourcing.
So your MVP launches.
Yeah.
You have a trickle of people on both sides of the marketplace. And I assume that Wethos takes a fee.
Yeah, so that was our original business model. We are a different company today, but yeah, we would take a 15% cut from the freelance side. So for nonprofits, it was totally free to use, to post, to find freelancers on. We ran into a slew of other challenges next, but for the most part, that was a business model that exists today. That's how Upwork makes money. That's how a lot of these companies do. So we took that as a starting point.
So what I want to know is, when this company starts running, and you see, hey, we have a shot of not having to go back to, the 9-to-5 grind.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
It felt crazy. When we launched the thing, it really did take off, and the timing matters because we ended up launching the first platform a month before the 2016 election. And after the election happened in early November, the pendulum always swings the other way. So all the people in the streets that were marching and doing all these protests, by day those were developers and designers and writers and whatever, and they were looking for an outlet to take action. So we ended up acquiring 1,000 freelancers and I think 200 nonprofits in the first 4 months. So it was an awesome feeling, but it was also operationally crazy because half of our tech was not built well, and we were doing a lot of stuff manually, as a lot of companies do in the beginning. So it was a lot of volume to sort of manage and process, and a lot of our customers needed more help. They were one step before knowing what they needed, in that they knew they wanted to get something done and they knew they had a problem, but it was hard for them to articulate what they needed. So that created an extra layer of customer service that was not like a DIY, just build a platform and they can do the thing. So that led us to down the path we're on today. But at the time, it was pretty amazing, and that's when we took that momentum to go fundraise.
Typically, your fundraising occurs when you're at this kind of sweet spot of supply and demand. So you have a lot of demand, and you literally know that if you don't up the supply, in the most basic sense, you're probably going to hurt your business. So what was that moment where you said, oh boy, we need some help, and we're not just begging, we're not, we have something real here, we need some help. Like, what was the moment?
Yeah, so, predominantly the tech breaking was the biggest concern at that point, and the fact that we really needed to build a sound product for this, and we knew it needed more than just sort of your standard marketplace with who our customers were. So we really went out to fundraise for that reason, to really be able to invest and build a great product. And then for awareness, because judging on the small network of people in New York that knew about us and how quickly the word was spreading. And in fact, my business we did $500,000 in revenue last year, all on word of mouth. Still runs quite well on just organic word of mouth and growth. But knowing that, we knew that if we had the money for awareness, and we were able to spread the word everywhere, then we would really be in business. And in order to really be in business, we needed a product.
So you needed a product. You realized your problem, and you realized you did not have the resources to run the company and build it, and that led you to say, hey, we need to get some help.
Yeah.
So who did you go to?
We just opened up the crazy cavern that is fundraising, this crazy rabbit hole that is fundraising, which is a whole thing in and of itself. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't go to business school. I didn't even know the difference between an angel investor and a VC. And figured out that okay, we need to raise some money to do this. So we had to run some numbers on what we needed, who we needed to hire. That was also very difficult, and just without having the experience of having done it before. And the fact that when you're fundraising, you're kind of getting emotional whiplash, not only from investors, but also just people around you go back and forth between raise this much, raise that much. When in reality, now I know this, but no one knows how much your company needs to raise but you. So that advice is always moot, unless it's an investor saying you should raise more capital to make sure that you have enough, because you will run out.
Do you feel you got investors that were aligned with your vision?
Yes, for sure. So it took me from that point forward, it took about 8 months for me to find a lead investor, and that was by the end of the round. So we raised $1.1 million in the first round, and by the end of it, I had talked to and gotten over 200 no's. The team that we have around us now, which is Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, Flybridge, Pipeline Angels, and a couple of really, really helpful angel investors. Actually, former CEO of Upwork is one.
All eyes are focused on that. They don't seem to be yelling at us.
If I die today, blame Hunter.
I hope that doesn't happen. We made it. We're alive.
Yeah, so, but it took a very long time, and it was very frustrating, and just a really interesting and also just frustrating experience generally. But yeah, now we definitely have a team around us that is aligned to our vision, and I think at the end of the day, people really latched on to the idea of more meaningful work as a catalyst and as sort of the why to why we exist.
Your team, how many people do you have?
Sure. So fast forward to today, we actually end up pivoting away from doing a traditional marketplace with one-to-one matching, and now we deploy collaborative teams. So because of our customer base and their needs being so different, it turns out they needed way more than just one freelancer. So over the summer, actually, just about 6 months ago, we pivoted and we started to sell teams of freelancers that we packaged together. And that just took off. So like the $500,000 I just mentioned, 90% of that came in the last 6 months from teams. So now the way that my team is structured today is there's 7 of us full time. So Claire, Kristen, and I. Claire heads up mostly sales and new business development, stuff like that. Kristen heads up communications, so all the strategy around, the website and social channels and internal communications and communications is a beast. Kristen works with Alexis, who's our content and community manager. So she works a lot with the freelancer community and on the social channels and manages a lot of that stuff, events, speaking opportunities, all that fun stuff. And then on the other side of things, we have Amy, who's our director of accounts. She runs the current accounts inside of the company and manages, all the inbound coming in from teams when they need new stuff or we need a new team when sales closes things. And then I have a product team. So I have Al and Jeremy who work on product and engineering, and they pretty much bring our ideas to life.
I want to unpack a little bit about your pivot, which is, and just a refresher, and she just did mention it, but I just want to mention it again. You sort of started out as a two-sided marketplace to connect individual freelancers with specific skills, graphic design, video skills, whatever it may be, to nonprofits. And then recently, you made a decision that wasn't working, or was there more demand for something else?
So it's a little bit of everything, but predominantly after we relaunched the new platform in January of 2017 after the funding, and we spent 6 months building and all that stuff. We relaunched this shiny new platform, and frankly the sales sucked. Like we couldn't get above, I think, gross income. We were doing like 20 or 30,000 a month, and at that point with our 15% take rate, it was pennies really what we were taking home in gross profit, and that's not even, that's before operational expenses. That we really weren't able to grow the revenue the way that we needed to.
So sort of barely profitable.
Yeah, we were processing volume, but
yes,
at the end of the day, with a marketplace like that and with such a small take rate, you have a choice, right? You have to have a high volume of contracts going through.
So even more volume,
or your contracts themselves need to be bigger. They need to be not, a couple $1,000s, they need to be $50,000.
Yeah.
So, and then, there's always a reason why something's not selling.
Yes.
So we just got to work, and thankfully our investors were brutally honest with us, which is what you need, and said these numbers need to go up. We really sat down with our customers and we started asking questions and selling different versions. I actually wrote a whole blog post about the pivot, and where we netted out was they really needed more than one freelancer, and so, which seems very obvious now looking back on it. So we started pairing them together almost like a tiny agency, and then we started creating all of these little tiny agencies made up of individual freelancers that were remote, distributed across the US. Claire, my co-founder, started putting scopes of work together against that. And that just took off. Revenue spiked 400% after we launched that the first month. So we had a decision to make at that point because our revenue wasn't there. I had let go of some of our original team members. We cut the office, we cut our burn rate, because money gives you two things. You can either have time or resources. What we needed was time. We slashed everything, our burn to like a third of what it was, and got to work. And after that point, after the new model took off, we had to pivot everything else. So we were a small team, and we had to make a decision of, am I right now going to do 2 things not great, or 1 thing really well, and how confident are we after 1 month's worth of data that Teams is the way to go? My opinion on it is like, when the numbers don't lie, well, they can lie, but when the numbers tell you to glaringly do something, you glaringly do it. So we shut off our offering of individual hires, and we spent the next 6 months selling like crazy and pivoting the remaining parts of the business to the new model, which included a product pivot, a business model change, two business model changes, actually.
So talk about that, the business model changes, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So one of the hardest things about teams is the level of complexity that happens in the back end to make this happen. So if you, and these are teams that don't exist today, so we're not aggregating agencies onto a platform. We're taking individual freelancers with custom skill sets and curating a team specifically for something that needs to get done. Down to not just the skills they have, but like I said before, the languages they speak, their demographic, where they're from, what they love, all of that gets taken into consideration because we're doing a lot of work. We've just seen over time that more diverse teams perform so much better. Anyway, it's very complicated. So from a business model perspective, we needed to find a way to we charge more now, we mark up more, but we're still far cheaper than a traditional agency is. And we needed to find sort of like a middle ground there, and we needed to make sure that our margins were big enough so that we could actually get to the point of like covering our operational expenses and then growing exponentially from there. So we ended up changing our business model from the 15% fee to a markup at first. So a freelancer has an hourly rate of $40 an hour. We mark up by 50%, which is about 300% cheaper than a traditional agency does. And we charge the client $60 an hour. Freelancer takes home 40, we take home 20. That worked, and that got us through the first 3 or 4 months. But then the sheer volume of teams that we were deploying on a monthly basis and managing, the tracking on the hours and tracking the hourly rates and all of that operationally, again, was too overwhelming. So we actually just recently launched a points-based model. This puts also all of our skills like on the same playing field. So each point is worth $150, and we assign points to different tasks and deliverables based actually on product scrum, which is the level of complexity required to complete it, the level of expertise, which is something that we added, the uncertainty or the risk, and then the time that it takes.
I have a question.
Sure.
And it's okay if the answer is yes or no.
Sure.
The question is, are you an agency now?
No.
Or are you a product?
No. What we are and where we're moving is to enable anyone, anywhere, to either form or hire a team, a custom curated team. So, and that goes beyond marketing. So today we do a lot of marketing stuff, but the database that we have in terms of freelancers and the taxonomy that we've created in the back end, which is our IP, can be applied to any skill set. So eventually we hope to move into creating finance teams, creating sales teams, creating operations teams, really anything. And you can think of us as the Amazon infrastructure for services. So Amazon has vendors, and people anywhere can sell what they sell on Amazon. Amazon made it really easy for anyone to sell stuff.
Sure, I've done it.
Yeah, they take care of all the infrastructure, the shipping, the billing, all that stuff. We are that for services. So as a freelancer, an individual freelancer, it's really hard to grow because your option is either raise my hourly rate or form an agency, which is usually too big of a leap for people, especially creatives who don't want to do a lot of the administrative stuff that goes into it, operational stuff. So what we do is we provide the resources for the rest of the team, the infrastructure from an operational standpoint. So you have a team lead, the scheduling, the check-ins, the invoicing, the payments, all of the sort of administrative stuff that goes into it. We take care of all of that. So now we have clients that come to us who want to rent a team, and we also now have freelancers who act a lot as our sales force, who bring things to us, and we put the infrastructure around them to be able to execute on a project that is much bigger than what they're able to do alone.
About the kind of teams you're working with.
Sure.
Are you global? Are you in?
We're US based.
Yeah.
All of our specialists are US based, and they're all custom based on the project, but predominantly we do a lot of web work, do a lot of campaigns, marketing campaign stuff. We have a lot of nonprofits who use us to rent social media teams on an ongoing basis. So,
yeah.
They're renting a part-time strategist, content person, and designer, and then anything really regarding, we do fundraising teams as well. That's something that we just rolled out. and anything regarding really like content creation, marketing, design, creative. It really spans across. We have right now 7 available roles to be put on teams and over 200 capabilities that can be sort of like picked off of a menu, essentially.
It's interesting because you started out with a really narrow focus.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where it's picked up a lot of steam and you reached out and got a lot of help and really got a lot of oomph is the only word. I don't even think that's a word, but
Yeah.
And now you're sort of in a place where you're still doing your initial goal, but do you feel like your vision has pivoted?
I think that what ended up happening was the nonprofit space, the market that we focus on, they invented this model. And the thing is that nonprofits run really lean, but as of today, besides us, there is no service that can really enable somebody to run that leanly. Because really they had a lot of them had heads of departments that were also doing all the work that was in the department. So they were the ones that not only invented this model, but also adopted it first. So like the ability to essentially have rentable departments or rentable teams is something that I think could span far beyond the nonprofit space.
Uh-huh.
But they were the ones that adopted it first. They were the innovators on it. So from this perspective, where we go from here is we still are predominantly focused in the space, and we do really well in the nonprofit space. In 2019, we do hope to expand into for-profit, but with the core message remaining, which is meaningful work.
Uh-huh.
So that now will expand beyond just an impact focus and into things like music and fashion and sports and other things that people care about. And so in that regard, we are creating curated teams of people who also share similar interests. So there's also this little sneaky social network aspect to it as well.
Social networking is very much in demand, and from 2013, when the junior people were, as you say, thrown on digital, there's more demand than you know what to do with.
Right. And the thing that's weird about social right now is like you're sort of split between the weird like LinkedIn environment, which I'm not sure that knows what it is right now, and then the social platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And when I was in college, they used to say, make your Facebook private, make your Twitter private, make your LinkedIn beefed up, blah, blah, all this stuff. Stuff just not applicable anymore in 2019. I mean, you're Googling people and you're looking for their personality, you're looking for who they are, to have, and so like I said, work and life start to blend. So we're seeing a really cool kind of, right now our freelance community does a lot of different stuff together in Slack channels, but we are definitely seeing a really, really cool social aspect to this where people are now meeting not based just on what they can do, but also what they all care about.
I think people have a lot of interests. Some of them maybe not consciously know, but when they're doing it and they're doing something that's rewarding, they know it, they feel it.
Yeah, and it makes a world of difference, I think. So, it's been a really sort of interesting journey to this point, but the power of collaboration in our environment has been absolutely incredible to watch, and to see what these freelancers can do together has just been mind-blowing. And it's not even comparable to an agency because the team itself is so curated. Frankly, the speed in which we move, I haven't mentioned this, but when a nonprofit decides they want to hire us or one of our teams, the teams are assembled, briefed, onboarded, and kicked off in 72 hours.
So it's like a spin-up AWS team,
Yeah.
except it's not robots. It's highly curated, highly targeted, highly motivated.
Yes.
Okay, let's take it from a different angle. What do you feel have been some of the biggest challenges over the last 3 years?
Well, the sheer amount of work
Yeah.
is frankly unfathomable. I mean, my summer, I didn't have one. Like, when we were pivoting, the sheer amount of just grunt work that goes into pivoting the rest of the company from like a data infrastructure perspective and a communications pivot and a product and all this stuff, I mean, it's been challenging not to burn out. It's been challenging not to emotionally, dissipate. I definitely do go to therapy. My co-founders do as well.
Can you get therapists on Wethos?
Not yet.
Aha.
But for us, like the mental and emotional strain, I think is challenging, and I think it's challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs, and probably isn't talked about enough. So that I think is one of the biggest things that I've struggled with. And then beyond that, finding great people is always a challenge, which I think we've done a really incredible job with this team. And then, being non-technical has continued to sort of haunt me in a way, but I have figured out many workarounds for that, and I've built crazy relational databases in Google Sheets because it's what I know. So as sort of like a blueprint and a spec for the product team to building it. So I think if I had an engineering background, it would be much easier for me to communicate the crazy vision that is an Amazon for small services.
But if you had an engineering background, you wouldn't have had a marketing background.
I know.
And so maybe you'd be seeing everything as an engineering problem, and maybe you wouldn't have even gotten to...
I probably wouldn't have. You're probably completely right. I think it's interesting for me. I feel very at home in this role only because as a CEO, you tend to have to be a mile wide and an inch deep, and I love learning as I go. And the sheer volume of things that I've learned in the last 3 years is like astounding me. And so that's what I do absolutely love about it, is that I'm constantly forced to learn new stuff. And that's where I sort of thrive, is in like a sink or swim kind of environment. Swimmer.
Yeah, you're not a sinker. I'm sure you take a day off.
Yes.
I'm sure you've taken a day off in the last 3 years.
I have.
Which is good.
I try. I actually was just home this weekend. I just took the last week off and went home to Syracuse to hang out with my parents.
There you go.
But I think for me the struggle, again, more of a mental health thing, because physically not working is one thing, but mentally not working, or not thinking about something, or not waking up in the middle of the night like, oh, I think we could do this for that problem. Like, it's really tough to get your brain to, slow down. And that's probably the biggest struggle that I have in terms of unwinding.
There are some nights that I go to sleep and the mind is still racing until 3 or 4 a.m. and it just happens sometimes. So I'm aware of...
in and out of a dream state, but you're like kind of working.
Yeah, but I'm still aware that like winding down is so critical.
Right.
To getting that full sleep.
Yeah. I have to do some, mantras just around like telling myself to stop. Consciously understanding when I'm doing that, my brain's still going, and saying like taking a couple deep breaths and saying like, think about it in the morning, and then just getting myself to kind of slowly shut down a little bit has definitely helped. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I would say. So
you definitely are aware of timing.
Yes.
And so on that topic, I'm going to challenge you.
Okay.
We are probably in a recession. We are probably in the beginning part of a recession. So this is a big kind of sink or swim moment.
Yeah.
And what's your plans for that?
So the thing about what we do is that we offer people the ability to rent teams. So one of the biggest things that happens during a recession is people lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And they lose their full-time jobs, they lose their security, they lose all these different things. And the great thing about what we do is that as we expand across other skills, we can basically scoop up that talent and make jobs that were not possible to freelance for before because they required a team, possible now. Things like being a researcher or even like being a strategist is tough without the creative team to execute. As we start to expand, not only can we help scoop up that talent, but next year we hope to roll out a safety net for our freelancers, things like insurance, things like paid vacation, other offerings like that, partnering with other companies who are already doing this in the space. And in that regard, it works on both ends. So we're able to sort of scoop that talent up and give them that steady paycheck, that steady stream of work, And then for companies who might be struggling and need to cut budgets, let people go, stuff like that, they're now able to rent fully functioning teams that is much more cost effective for them on sort of a short-term basis to help them get through some of the tough periods.
Competition. Now that you've pivoted away from the one-to-one kind of marketplace, do you feel like you're competing with some companies out there that you weren't competing with before?
A little bit. I think where we tend to sit at the intersection of full-time staffing, freelance platforms, and agencies, consultancies, vendors, small shops, things like that. And it's sort of a combination of those things. So right now, like direct competitors, I mean, we don't have any. Like, there is no other place but Wethos that you can go and rent a curated team. That said, this idea in and of itself, I'm sure it's been thought of a million times. We're just the first to execute on it. And for us, when we think about like our competitive moat, it comes down to 3 areas. Product, so the IP that we have in-house, our taxonomy, our data infrastructure, the way that we automate the team creation, and the pricing at the same time and instantly is a huge competitive moat for us. Process, the way that we run our teams in terms of being able to kick off in 72 hours, tracking all that feedback, all those timelines, all those deliverables. The process that we run in and of itself that enables complete strangers to come together that quickly and do great work is huge. And then the last piece is our people, which is the center of everything we do. And that's why we guarantee the freelancers get paid on time. We want to roll out protections for them, things like that, because we know at the end of the day, without our people, none of this means anything. And so for me, the winner, I guess, of this space is the one who can capture the best talent. And the best talent is going to go to the place that has meaningful work for them and to the place that respects them and treats them well. And that in and of itself is not hard to compete with right now. For me, like we spread our sort of competitive advantages across those 3 areas, and that enables us to exist and be much harder to replicate than just copying a marketplace and building sort of a similar functionality for a different market.
I think we've covered all the bases.
Yeah, this has been awesome.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
I should do like a brisk walk every day this time.
Why not?
I feel great now. I'm like, okay.
I did an average of 8,000 steps last year.
Wow.
With some down days,
Yeah.
Days where I literally lied in bed and was on Instagram for most of the day.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I thought I was doing well because I live in a 6th-floor walk-up and I have a 16-year-old poodle that I have to carry up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
Like 4 times a day. So I'm doing that for 6 months and now I feel like a triathlete. But I'm probably not a triathlete.
And I am not a triathlete, but I am a very vigorous walker.
Yeah.
And we're gonna leave it on that. So please check out wethos.co, wethos.co. So excited for everything that you're doing, and thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.